Welcome to the G5 Huddle. The College Huddle is the largest fan-led college sports podcast community on the internet. The College Huddle offers its members a network of other podcasts and content creators to work with, giving the audience a more in-depth content. If you're interested in more college football coverage, then I highly recommend that you go follow the College Huddle on X at College Huddle or our YouTube channel at the College Huddle Podcast. And visit the website, thecollegehuddle.com, where you will find articles and information from our 70-plus college athletic focused podcasts. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. I'm Luke Probasco, and I'm joined here today with my co-host, Justice. We're excited to be back and bring you the G5 college football content that you love each and every week. Welcome, Justice.
What's going on, man? It's we're pre-recording this, but I have a wedding to go to this weekend, so I'm going to be out of town, and yeah, it's easier to pre-record this weekend.
And I just got to apparently gonna have to get ready for Mother's Day weekend. That's next weekend, so I gotta go do something with the kids and get something prepared. Otherwise, I'll probably be. So if you're listening to this, hey guys, there's a Mother's Day weekend coming up.
Yep, next week.
So
don't forget it.
Yeah, definitely don't forget it. I usually just as I kick it off to you for the news and notes, but I kind of want to take this beginning part. There's no easy way to like kind of get into it and then get out of it, but I do want to talk about it. Our thoughts and prayers are with App State, who lost offensive lineman Jack Murphy this past week. There's not a lot of details out there. We're not going to talk about it too much, but we did feel that it was worth bringing up and being acknowledged. But like I said, there's no good way to kind of transition from something devastating in that community and the team, but we will do our best. So, Justice, take us to the recent portal news here for the G5.
So some guys that entered the portal since last time, in terms of guys that would play significant roles on their teams. It certainly isn't an all-inclusive list, but we try to do our best to kind of comb through the portal. Cornerback D'Angelo Pons leaving JMU. There was some hints that maybe there was some tampering going on. Not really sure, but I did see. I think Hayes Fawcett put out a list, kind of like a graphic with him, and like it was like a who's who. Like it was like pretty much anybody and everybody in terms of blue bloods are kind of after him. He was a freshman All-American last year, so no shortage of suitors for D'Angelo Pons. Running back Craig Squirrel Williams, moving on from Louisiana Tech. He was at Baylor, went to Louisiana Tech last year. I think folks kind of expected he would pop there at Louisiana Tech because he had some good games there for Baylor. Never really did much at Louisiana Tech, and he is back in the portal. Quarterback Still Wassel is leaving Akron. Again, reduces kind of that quarterback competition. My guess is they kind of named who the starter was, or at least told the team, and he kind of decided to move on. The same with quarterback Tyler Voss, San Jose State. He had kind of fallen out of that. They started off, I think, with a quarterback competition of 6. Halfway through, it got narrowed down to 2, and Voss was not one of those guys in that 2. Khalil Jacobs, South Alabama, a big loss to him. Luke and I talked with Craig Stevenson, the South Alabama beat writer, earlier today, man, and he, that's one of the guys he mentioned that was kind of a big loss for South Alabama. Wyoming loses defensive tackle Gavin Meyer, kind of a starter for them in the middle there. Definitely a big piece of what they do on offense. And then finally, safety Kawan McCray, Jacksonville State. Jacksonville State's taken quite, them. I think them and Utah State, from a defensive perspective, have kind of taken a lot of big hits this portal season. Jacksonville State also lost Chris Hardy, defensive end, who was had a great season last year, and then Larry Worth, who Had a big bowl game for them, and was kind of would have stepped into a big time role this coming season. Both of those guys also left recently, so Jacksonville State was a pretty stout defense, especially considering they jumped up to FCS or to FBS from FCS last year. They were one of the better defensive units in Conference USA, but they certainly have taken some big hits this offseason in terms of guys leaving through the portal.
And I know that McCray safety, at least out of the defensive spots that they already lost and whatnot, they at least seem to have enough going on in that defensive backfield that, I mean, it's going to be still a tough loss, but at least it's not like this huge gutting of the defensive backfield.
Yeah, I think
I
the
can't say the
losses
same.
of Hardy and Worth are probably if you're ranking them, they're definitely a bigger impact to that Jacksonville State defense than McCray.
Yep.
But the portal taketh and the portal giveth. So let's talk about some guys that made some commitments to some G5s. First up, quarterback Timmy McClain, formerly of South Florida, went to Central Florida last year, started a few games for them last year.
And I do have a little bit of news. I don't know if it's breaking news or anything, but I was talking to somebody who covers Arkansas State, and I kind of was asking about Timmy McClain, and in our other podcast, the G5 Hive, we're doing a Worker Bee series where we interview beat reporters and whatnot. I was like, hey, do you want to wait till later, till you kind of figure out what's going on with McClain in that offense? And they're like, no, we can move forward. Jalen Raynor's the guy. And so that was that's kind of interesting news.
It's kind of a strange. I mean, it just seems like a very strange move for him, right? I mean, he was behind KJ Jefferson, who has 1 year left, and he transfers to Arkansas State to go behind, true sophomore Jalen Rayner. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, it just seems very odd to me. Like, if the motive is playing time, like why you would go somewhere where now you're stuck behind someone that's even younger than you. So that I don't know. Seems like a strange move to me.
Maybe it's like, hey, I'm about to be a starter, and I really liked being a backup quarterback. I get all, like, hey, I get all I'm a quarterback treatment, and around campus, and I go to parties, and I'm a quarterback. But then, like, you don't have to actually do anything in the game. Maybe that's what it is. Probably not, but
could be.
Makes me think of Blue Mountain State. I don't know if you ever saw that series on Netflix.
Yeah. So Utah State loses another pretty important defensive personnel, and Sean Dolak. Sean Dolak, 2 years ago was I don't know if he was the leading tackler but he was like top 3 tacklers in all of college football at Buffalo. Last year he got injured, missed the majority of the season, and then this offseason he transferred to Utah State. And by all indications, he was set to be their starting middle linebacker. But he's had some things go on in his personal life, and he really felt the need. Hey, I need to be back closer to home, and so he transferred this week from Utah State back to Buffalo. The word that we got was it's not NIL related. Basically, he just has some things going on, and he felt the need to be back home and closer to his family. So look for Sean Dolak to kind of pick up where he left off in Buffalo and just be a starting middle linebacker, and maybe we'll see it. Provided he can stay healthy, should be one of the top tacklers in the country this year. Wide receiver Marquise Shoulders moving from Tulsa to Houston. That's a big loss for Tulsa there. And Houston certainly needed to replace Sam Brown, who left to go to Miami. Fresno State making some moves at wide receiver. They bring in wide receiver Shadon James coming from Idaho State. Shadon James was an all Big Sky receiver last year. I don't know if you saw this, Luke, but the kind of the beat guy there for Fresno State kind of wrote about how Shadon James is going to be the starter at the slot position. I'm thinking, like, the dude just got here, and you're already anointing him the starter for slot, which by all indications that was kind of be Jalen Moss.
Yep.
Not to say it's not going to happen, but it just really struck me as odd. Like, literally, the guy just transferred, and you're already anointing him the starter at slot. And then they also bring in Raylan Sharp, wide receiver from Southwest Missouri State. Last week we talked with David Brown from State of Atlanta. Well, Georgia State has got a couple of transfers coming in, and we talked about this last week that Georgia State will probably be a team that would be making a lot of moves here in the portal. They bring in Christian Valou, formerly of Penn State, but most recently Pittsburgh, quarterback coming to Georgia State. I would assume he's maybe going to compete for that starting job in the fall. We'll kind of see what happens there. And then they also bring in Jordan Ford, a running back from Tulsa, also coming to Georgia State. And then finally, App State, a couple of moves along the in the trenches here. They bring in defensive lineman Nick Campbell coming over from NC State, and offensive lineman Garner Langlow coming over from Auburn. And those are kind of the highlights of commitments and guys leaving this week. There won't be any more new transfer portal entries. That closed on May 1st. So unless something just didn't leak, all the entries should pretty much be done. I believe players had until the 1st to notify the school, and I believe the school has 48 hours to kind of get that in. And so that would be, I guess, today. So maybe
there would be a chance. There's a chance grad transfers get one extra day, and nothing's going to process over the weekend. So there's a chance if we do see some stragglers, it's Monday and it's a grad transfer, but they don't have to report that until they get 72 hours. So
that should be. I mean, it should be pretty much be the end of guys entering the portal. But obviously, we'll still have commitments all the way up until fall camp. So we'll kind of keep track of that and share that on a weekly basis.
Yeah. And then another piece of news that I just kind of found interesting it got brought up to me. I kind of looked at it and it came up a lot. I haven't dug into it a lot, but just be aware. Xavier Smith, he used to be at Colorado, DB, then went to Austin P, and then transfers over to UTEP. And UTEP's got a lot of Austin P guys, so he kind of follows that group over there. But he's kind of in this Twitter spat with Colorado and Dion and Shador. And apparently, from what I see, is he's mid, I guess is what the kids say.
That's what Shador said about him.
That's what Shador said. And then Dion had some stuff to say. But interesting of this spat between, it's almost like UTEP has a guy, Xavier Smith, living rent-free in Colorado's headspace. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of started it was Xavier Smith, I think, sent a tweet out basically, I don't know, kind of telling his version of the story of when he basically got told to leave or cut from Colorado.
And he had like his Twitter handle, or like they had Twitter handles on their jerseys, and he had it taken off or put like transfer portal on his jersey or something. I don't know.
I don't know if that was him or some other student. Might have been another one. I don't know if that's specifically him or another player. I kind of like what I gathered from his story was basically he just felt like it wasn't like that. Dion really never got to know him, and that it just like. It just wasn't. He didn't feel like it was handled properly, I guess, is the best way to say it. He just kind of felt like they didn't, Dion and folks there just didn't kind of handle things in the best light, and that was the gist of what I got from what he tweeted. And then, like Shador kind of tweeted back, said, "Well, I only know who this guy is. He must be kind of mid or."
I mean, that kind of makes sense though, if that's it, because then he goes to Austin P. I don't know a lot about Austin P, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say campus and things are a little bit smaller than Colorado.
Sure.
So it's like maybe that's just kind of what he needs is kind of more of that small classroom, get to know like a smaller community as opposed to this big thing where you're more of a number than a person. And maybe that was it. But I mean, it is what it is. If you're interested, feel free to look at it a little bit more, dig into that. But I don't know, anything Dion's got a lightning rod.
To me, the main takeaway, or the main takeaway I've taken from this is like, what does this do in the future for Colorado? Right. Number one, will players, number one, they're at Colorado, will they be scared to leave now because they don't want Shadur and Dion and Shiloh, who have all these followers, talking crap about them, right? That's one concern. And that was one person's take on it. It was like, well, Dion did this to keep people from leaving, basically saying, hey, if you leave, we're going to talk crap about you. That was one reporter's take on it. The other thing that could be interesting is like how it's going to impact them from being able to bring in additional people, right? Like it's just something else for a player to kind of process and think about. Like, hey, do I want this kind of attention? Do I want to do I want to expose myself to this potentially if it doesn't work out? Those are just, I don't know, additional things that guys looking to transfer to Colorado would definitely have to I think kind of take into consideration.
The other thing that honestly I took from it, we just had the NFL draft. I watched, every draft you got to watch draft day, right? You got to you got to watch that, and they're worried about who didn't attend a birthday party. Why didn't people attend this birthday party? Well, executives are looking at, they're putting a lot of money into these kids, and Shador's doing this and that and spatting with people on Twitter. Is that what you want for your franchise quarterback as he goes into this year trying to get drafted? It's just kind of interesting. I mean, it seems like he's perfect for the Las Vegas Raiders now. Just seems like something that they didn't take their quarterback, so maybe that's the play here. But that's kind of what stood out to me too, is kind of like how you interact with people, and if people don't like you and don't attend your birthday party, what's that say? That's what it kind of reminded me of.
Sure.
But
Speaking of the NFL draft,
yeah, got some general news. Go take it ahead. Take it away.
So for the NFL draft, just want to kind of look at some numbers for the G5 schools that got drafted. The Sun Belt led all G5 conferences with 6 players getting drafted. American had 5 players. Conference USA had 3 players. Mountain West had 2, and the Mid American also had 2 players. And we talked about this a little bit last week. Probably the biggest offensive snub for me was Blake Watson, who did sign a UDFA, who would have been played for Memphis from the American.
Where did he go? Was that Denver?
He went to Denver. Yeah, Denver signed him as a UDFA. I don't know. I just thought maybe he could. He doesn't play special teams, but he is a very good pass catcher. So I thought maybe that might get him drafted. He is a little bit of an older prospect, so that probably didn't necessarily do him any favors. But yeah, so that's kind of the NFL draft by the numbers for the G5. Just trying to think if there was a defensive player off the top of my head from the G5 that kind of shocked me. Probably not. Most of the other the G5 guys for defense, I feel like we're probably UDFAs. Our buddy Trey Taylor got drafted. Bo Richter signed a UDFA. So yeah, that's kind of the NFL draft dominated as usual by the P5. Good to see the Sun Belt though, as a team, as a fan of a Sun Belt team. Good to see them kind of lead the way in terms of NFL draft. And then this next piece of news I just kind of thought was interesting is about the transfer portal and regards to players. The number of players enter the portal, and then they took those number of players and kind of did that in terms of a percentage of players who played last year. So if the guy who entered the portal but didn't play last year, he wouldn't be included in that calculation. Now, obviously, you can see on the screen here, they did it by conference, and they included like every FBS and FCS conference. But for our purposes, I just want to kind of talk about the FBS conferences. The American Athletic would have ranked number 1 with 101 players, 48.1% of players that actually played last year. The MAC would have been second. The Mid-American Conference with 71 players, 41.3%. And then we get into the Power Five. This data is using last year's conference alignment, so it includes the Pac-12, who would have ranked third with 78 players, 39.6%. ACC number 4, 88 players, 37%. SEC 5, 78 players, 34%. Then we go back to the G5 with the Sun Belt number 6, 68 players, 32%. Mountain West number 7, 54 players, 31%. Big 12 number 8, 65 players, 30%. Big 10 number 9, 66 players, just under 30%. And then finally, Conference USA ranked 10th with 38 players, 27.7%. I'm not really sure what if there's a huge takeaway here, right? I mean, I think you would need to be able to dive into the numbers even more to say, hey, well, with the American and the MAC being number 1 and number 2, was it guys moving up? What was that? I think that kind of would be a natural inclination. Is that I think without further analyzing the data, people would just assume, the G5 guys are moving up. But that's not real. I mean, based on past history, that certainly isn't necessarily the case in terms of the majority of folks. The majority of past history would tell you the majority of G5 transfers end up dropping down or don't find a new home. That's just kind of the reality of the situation. But just something kind of interesting, especially as we get into this NIL era. Can you draw some links in terms of these guys jumping for NIL money? Certainly that's going to happen, but without analyzing the data further, you just really don't know that at this point. But it's kind of be interesting to see in this new era how things kind of shake out and what trends maybe you can kind of glean from that information.
All right. Well, then we've got these trends, and then we may put in another. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Justice, help me find it. I don't know
what you're trying to say, man.
I don't know.
For a new era,
yeah,
a new era. Next big thing.
Next big thing. It could be.
It could be
a players association.
Could be a huge thing.
It could be a huge thing. So ESPN put a story out. Who was it? He puts out a lot of stuff for the college.
I don't know who wrote it. It's about UAB though.
Yeah, UAB. And Dilford goes out almost like he's kind of seems like he seeked out this information and then brought it back to UAB about this player association. And the entire football team signed up with this players association, athletes.org. And they've got roughly 10,000 athletes between, it seems like it's mainly basketball and football.
Well, do they have 10,000 or I thought they wanted to get to 10,000? No, I don't think they have 10,000 yet. They only have 3,000 right now. They're trying to get to 10,000. Yeah. Which what the 10,000 represents is football, men's basketball, women's basketball from just from the power conferences.
Okay, so that's what they're trying to get to.
Yeah, they're trying to get to that 10,000. Right now, they're sitting at 3,000 total, and of that 3,000 total, a little over 1,300 are football, men's basketball, and women's basketball from the power conferences. So, of their 10,000 goal, they're 10%, a little over 13%.
And then Dilfer, there was a quote in here is they're going to have a seat at the table. I want to make sure I help pour gasoline on something that is going to happen no matter what. So that, you go back and you look, what was it, 2 years ago when he kind of sat at ESPN or whatnot, and it's come try to get my players. I've got friends in high places type thing. He's almost like the Dion in a nicer sense for the G5, but like not doing it for the clicks, but like he's really going to bat for these players and being really vocal about it. I guess that's what I kind of mean about the Dion thing is he's being very vocal. I don't know how many other G5 or for that matter P4 P5 teams would do that to go up to their to bat for their players, and Jacob Zeno's like, hey, we've been it was interesting. In a way, we've been cheated out of money and decisions are being made behind our back. Also, that's kind of an interesting quote to put out there, too. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that. But, yeah, that if it goes to a players association, my next, and it seems like it might move that way. And I'm trying to remember the name of the person who does the athletes.org, but they're a former NFL player who was on the NFL Players Association board for like 10 years or something like that. So
the founder is Jim Cavale, but the guy you're talking about is kind of like next under him. See if I can find his name real quick. Brandon Copeland. That's the guy you're talking about, Brandon Copeland.
Yes. So it's like they've got experience with that stuff. And I think so. UAB, ESPN reached out to UAB. UAB had no comments, but also they mentioned the NFL player wise. Maybe it was from Dilford himself. He's like, well, we don't plan on flexing our muscles against UAB or anything right now. I just want them to be prepared, and it's almost like they're at the forefront of this. And it's interesting because it's a G5. It's not a P4 or P5 thing that they're at the forefront of this and they get to shape all this. It's kind of the G5 that's starting to get onto this and shape stuff. And maybe that's just kind of how things are moving. Because if there's a super conference in the P4 or whatnot, and the G5 has to go do their own thing, are they getting ready for this? I think they're positioning themselves to be agile and flexible no matter what happens, that they're ready.
Well, and I think, like, to your point, I think an association where you kind of have these collective bargaining agreement, for lack of a better word, this agreement, like, I think that, I mean, off the cuff, I think that really helps the G5 teams more so than the Power 4 teams. I mean, the Power 4 teams have, virtually unlimited budget, unlimited money, resources that the G5 just doesn't have, right? If you kind of have this agreement, you got to assume there's going to be, I would assume, and maybe this is wrong on my part, that there's going to be some kind of restrictions or caps or something along those lines to somewhat try and even the playing field. And that's certainly going to be more advantageous to the G5 than the P4 for sure.
And Justice, what if there's a players association, and it's happened before in every sport that I can think of that's had a players association. There's typically a holdout, and then guess what? There's usually like one guy who crosses that line. But what if that one guy? All right, I'm gonna go play for South or North Dakota State. I'm gonna play for the Bison.
I don't know how that would be interesting in the college landscape, right? Because you got, again, this is maybe me being naive, but you got, my assumption is that being a student is still going to be a part of it, some way, shape, or form. And so, if you're holding out for football, does that mean that your football scholarship is now revoked and you're no longer, I don't, what I'm saying? Like, so I don't know that you would actually see that happen, just because I would think, that there, because of the educational component, the student component of it, that they couldn't just like, strike, so to speak.
All right.
Because then they wouldn't be students anymore. I mean, I don't know.
Maybe they would be students. I guess, okay, let's say there's a boycott, there's a strike. I'm still going to school there. Let's say Old Dominion, you're an Old Dominion fan. I'm still going to school there. I'm getting my scholarship paid for, or maybe it's not paid for. I don't know.
Well, if you're not playing football, maybe that means your scholarship's not being paid for. So I mean, that was my whole point. I mean, now you're not a student anymore. I don't know, but
then if you're doing that and you're there, does it accrue a season? Now can I now can I, maybe be a 22-year-old super senior because I didn't play because there's a holdout, or does that get counted against me and I lose a year? That, I mean, obviously long down the road, but those are kind of
Well,
interesting things. And
I mean, I
and
think in
even
your
if
scenario, if they had a redshirt year, they could just certainly use that as the redshirt year, right? Um, but I mean, now that the kind of the COVID year is kind of getting behind us, to the best of my knowledge, you basically, I mean, under without getting medical red shirts, et cetera, you basically have 5 years to play for. I mean, that's the basic, I guess, what it comes down to, right? And then that gives you a red shirt year. So you have, you could use that red shirt, but obviously, medical red shirt guys, get more years. We got guys playing 8 or 9 years with the COVID year, plus medical red shirt, plus the regular red shirt. Um, I don't know. Hopefully, things will get back to a little bit normal without the COVID year. But yeah, I mean, all those things kind of have to be worked out with this association. The another very interesting thing that I found is like there isn't an association. There are multiple entities kind of vying to quote be the association for these college players or the union, right? So you have this athletes.org, you got a college football players association that was started by a professor at Minnesota, and then you also have like the union, right? You have two lawsuits kind of going on right now with Dartmouth and USC with the National Labor Relations Board and trying to unionize. Um, and so I don't know that this situation is going to work itself out within like I don't know,
it's
probably
an
the next.
Justice, it's an election year. It's going to be a while.
Yeah, I mean it's probably like 15 months down the road, right? I mean just those cases in the union cases with Dartmouth and USC, you got to assume that's probably like 15 to 24 months away from being settled because I mean while you'll have the cases heard and a decision will be made, they're going to appeal it, right? That you would think the NCAA will appeal it or who the representatives for those particular unions would appeal it. So it's definitely got some. There's going to be some time before it's decided in terms of who's going to be the official union or association or whatever you want to call it. Certainly, it sounds like athletes.org is kind of maybe if you establish a pecking order, maybe they're number one right now. Be interesting to see kind of as things progress if they kind of stay in that role, if they're able to absorb the others. Um, at the end of the day, like athletes.org isn't doing this for free. Um, their goal is to get the players paid, but then get themselves paid some kind of percentage of all that. So it's not like they're doing what's in they have ulterior motives, I guess is the best way to say it, right? As with anything, like it's hard to get things for free nowadays.
I'll be interested to see how that payout works because like you get agents that are like, hey, I'm gonna represent you, knowing that you're gonna kind of get that NFL payday. But like a lot of these guys are not gonna go pro. Like, okay, instead of paying a student loan back, I'm paying this guy or this corporation some money, even though I'm a financial advisor at somewhere else. Edward Jones. Edward Jones, not a sponsor. If you want to sponsor us, please let us know. You can find us at the College Huddle or at College Huddle. Um, but yeah, it's that, and then you've got. I mean, you've got a bit of an engineering background, but then you got are these players going to be independent contractors? Because I'm sure you've worked with contractors before. You'd like them to do stuff, but you can't really always tell them what to do because you don't have as much rights over them as an employee of the school. But then you know the school doesn't really probably want them as employees, but also you
Well,
want
the
to
NCAA has
control
been
over them.
adamant that they don't want them as they've been kind of
Right.
they don't
I mean,
want them
but
as
you don't.
employees.
Okay, you don't want them as employees. So if they do independent contractors, well then, hey, we want some of this contract money for these TV rights. Like, no, we're not giving you that. It's like the NCAA wants its cake and wants to eat it too, and they're not going to if they go into that become that independent contractor, because you just get less control over those. It's like, hey, I want you to check in on at these periods, and then if I don't do it, like, we can just say like, hey, we don't want you back. There's like, but we want you back because we need to make money off of your product. It's this weird thing. So that again, there's a lot of things to figure out, but this was a very, very interesting story. And if you haven't, go check it out on ESPN. Yeah.
I failed to mention one other group too that kind of plays into in terms of like maybe being representatives, and that's the NIL groups, right? So you have these collectives, and there are kind of two big collective groups kind of managing a lot of the other collectives throughout the country, with the collective association and then SANIL. Those two groups are saying, hey, we should be considered as well as the players association, because they're already representing a lot of players, right? In terms of and getting them money in terms of the NIL. So that's just another group that is kind of vying to be that group, and from their standpoint, it makes a lot of sense because they're already representing these players, and they're already representing these players from a financial perspective. So that group also makes a lot of sense too in terms. And again, I don't think it's going to be settled anytime soon in terms of who actually who will be the group, so to speak. But yeah, definitely, like you said, very interesting. One thing I wanted to point out in terms of athletes.org, that not only they provide the athletes that sign with them support services such as legal advice, medical second opinions, mental health professionals, all free of charge. They're funded by private equity. Athletes.org is, right, venture capitalists, and like I said before, they have plans to make money, to who knows, double, triple, quadruple their investment by taking a percentage of what these athletes would earn from television rights, etc. The other association that I mentioned, the College Football Players Association, they actually, like, for guys to join them, they have to pay dues, which is similar to kind of what the NFL does, right? You pay a certain percentage of your dues to the Players Association.
And I think I would be nervous about the athletes.org and being an equity firm, because like you said, they're in it for the money, and what happens when that money doesn't come, or that money doesn't grow as quick as they want.
Yeah, hopefully they're in it for the long term, because it's, I mean, like I said,
it'll be torn apart if they don't get what they want quick. And if you got, let's just say they've got 10,000 people, like, what happened? And that could be scary. And so I at least hope that there's educated. I mean, Dilford probably did his due diligence, but it's something to be aware of.
Well, I mean, I guess at this point, these athletes, I don't know what the contracts read and how that reads. Hopefully, they got some advice before they sign something where they basically sign their rights away. But hopefully, yeah. At the end of the day, if I would assume if they're not going to be the ones that are the association, that these players have some, I would hope, have a way out to actually join whoever that ends up being, whether that's the College Football Players Association, or one of these NIL groups, or an actual college football players union. One last point I wanted to talk about in regards to this is just kind of the NCAA's response to this, and basically they said, hey, we think this is a good thing. They didn't really say too much in terms of an opinion, but he basically said, hey, if we have a players association, that's probably a good thing. And I'm drawing a blank on Charlie Baker, the NCAA president. He was quoted as saying, hey, he thinks if there's an association, that it would be enormously positive.
Maybe tells you the way that it's going. It's like, all right, I can't remember. There's, I mean, the NCAA has all these cases against them right now, and
They have a
I think
lot,
it,
yeah.
and I think it's one that has to do with, I think it's the Dartmouth, and maybe it's a conference or whatnot. But I know there's one in front of a judge that it's like the judge that has seen it has favored whoever's going up against the NCAA every time. So there's an uphill battle. But if you got the commissioner saying, "Hey, this is a good thing," then or the president saying this is a good thing, it's probably going to happen,
Well, I
and they
mean, I
know
think
it.
it's inevitable. It's going to happen. Yeah, for sure. He, you know, he's I don't know. He's probably got bigger fish to fry, maybe, or he's on his crusade to get rid of player props. That's kind of been Charlie Baker's mantra. Even going back to when he was a governor, he wasn't in favor of player props, and he took that news cycle. I don't know, was it 2 months ago at this point, where some guys, some professional players, were kind of getting in trouble in terms of doing things they shouldn't do as far as gambling, and he kind of took that news cycle opportunity to say, "Hey, we shouldn't be having player props for college football," and he did get some folks to agree with him, a couple of states, but there aren't a ton of states that allow college player props to begin with.
But we definitely want the player props to come back, and we want to keep them, and the betting to continue because I kind of like what the Big Ten started doing with these injury reports. Like, I
Oh
get it; they're
yeah,
like 2 hours before, but if you push those player props in betting, and there's money to be made, places are going to
yes,
want to know if
exactly.
players or
It gets us to
people
getting
are playing or not,
actual injury reports, which
and
would be
closer
a
to that
huge thing for
NFL.
college football.
No, and I don't do a lot of the player prop stuff because I have to go to Illinois if I want to do that. I'm based in Iowa, but it's like
Yeah, I
it would
can't do
help
props
in
either.
getting that. It would be nice to get information, and right now the Big Ten's doing it. But you get, the joke was, oh, you got how many Iowa players are checking their phone 2 hours before to see who in the Big Ten is sitting out or hurt, so they can change their bets on DraftKings or whatnot. DraftKings not a sponsor. If you want to sponsor us, find us at College Huddle. Thank you. Um, but yeah, that we want that going. So, but you got anything else that you want to hit
No, I
about
mean,
this article?
no, I mean, like I said, it's just interesting. Like you said, interesting that the the G5 kind of leading the way, and UAB being the first team where the whole team signed up. So, like I said, it'll be in the news probably for the next 12 to 15 months, and be some time before we have a resolution. But definitely something the players deserve. They're the ones making all. They are the product that's being sold, and they definitely deserve a cut of that for sure.
Go get your money. And if you are looking for more G5 college football content or G5 content, please check out the lineups of teams over at the College Huddle. They have articles, podcasts, YouTube shows, plenty of content for the G5 college football fans and G5 college fans. After all of that, if you still want more G5 college football content, we encourage you to check out our other show, the G5 College Football Podcast and YouTube show, G5 Hive at G5 on X. We're currently producing our Worker Bee series. We kind of referenced that earlier in this podcast, but we deep dive into the landscape of G5 college football teams with the folks that know the teams the best. We interview beat reporters, super fans, school podcasts, and even student reporters to get all the skinny on the G5 teams they cover. Several episodes are available now on G5 Hive YouTube channel and in podcast form on Apple and Spotify. This past week, we released episodes covering Boise State Broncos, Miami Redhawks, and the Bowling Green Falcons. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in a podcast form, please rate and review. With that, we wish that all your field goals go right down the middle and your favorite team always gets the W. Until next time, we are the G5 Huddle, and thank you for your support.